Too many Australians still seek mental health care only in a crisis, unaware that preventative care and social support options exist in their local community.
There's a lot of people out there who are disconnected from the system, not getting support, and the consequence of that is that they're essentially invisible to a lot of planners because statistically on any of the waiting lists, they're not there.
To spread the word about mental health care, a radically simple solution was tested with the ACDC project.
We've been doing this by going door to door to every household in selected communities right across the whole of Australia in every state and territory.
Local teams were trained to discuss mental health with residents proactively.
Proactive outreach is really important because people don't know what they don't know. They don't know about services that are available. They don't know how to seek help.
Information was customised to highlight local services in local languages.
We connected with the cultural gatekeepers of the communities to customise and tailor the ACDC project to the needs of that community.
Even if we visit and nobody's home, we still leave the information in the letterbox. That means 35,000 houses have received a brochure and a magnet either in the letterbox or in their hands.
Residents were also invited to complete an anonymous survey about mental health care in their community, developed with the Centre for Social Impact.
We've got some really high-level researchers riding shotgun with us on this, and they're finding the data really exciting so far. It confirmed the really clear correlation between social determinants like housing or finance, etc., and mental health and well-being.
The ACDC experiment, the first of its kind in the world, was a success.
It's novel and new, and it's a bit labour-intensive, but the results are extraordinary.
What has really blown us away is how receptive the householders, how receptive the community has been to having those conversations about mental health.
What this project has highlighted is the need to have conversations, face-to-face interaction.
People want to talk. In majority, they want their stories to be told.
They asked us to sit down outside and they spoke for hours. They overcome their stigma.
Because we asked them in Arabic, they straight away opened for us. I believe it's really good idea because we need to talk to people. If everyone talk about issues, we could fix it.
The ACDC project has connected thousands of Australians with community support and collected important data on problems faced by the sector.
The final research report will show the solutions, show the ideas and the recommendations, and build an appetite across the sector for change.
People connectors are the backbone of the ACDC project, bringing enthusiasm, passion and diversity to the role, as the video clearly shows. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on today and to pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to any First Nation people here today. We also acknowledge the lived and living experience of people with mental health issues and emotional distress, their families, carers and kin, and recognise their valuable contribution to improving mental health services globally.
Hi, my name is Siale and this is my colleague David. We're from the ACDC project, assisting people through direct connection. You may have seen a postcard that we'd left a few days ago in your letterbox. We're going around door knocking the area, getting as many houses as we can, just having chats with people, checking in on their mental health and well-being, and to gather information just to see how community's doing. It's a national project which is covering 22 areas, so we're very lucky to be able to have it in our area. We're going to be delivering a brochure and a magnet with local services as well as national, just to let people know about what they can tap into. Do you have time for a chat?
Sure. So, as you saw from the video, the ACDC project rolled out across Australia. My role as the trainer and consultant for the project was to facilitate the 1 week of fairly intensive face-to-face training for people connectors and line managers, the fortnightly community of practice meetings, and the ongoing support of people connectors while they were working. The project involved a network of community-managed organisations who employed people connectors who door knocked for 13 weeks. That's you. Some people connectors had lived or living experience, or they lived locally, and some had culturally significant backgrounds. People connectors are a diverse group. Oh, we seem to have got one too far. Sorry, there we go. People connectors are a diverse group from a range of experiences and qualifications, as you can see. They always worked in pairs, they door knocked on some weekends, and attended community forums and kind of social groups to talk about the project. In less than 2 years, 35 people connectors from around Australia knocked on nearly 38,000 doors, had over 12,000 conversations with people aged 18 years and over, and completed 4,300 surveys. An amazing effort. You have to understand that engaging and building rapport with somebody at their front door takes trust and time. Each householder is a unique individual, and people connectors become very flexible and adaptive in their approach. It can take 30 minutes to complete the survey with a householder, and so some discussions can take 1 to 2 hours each. If householders identify any mental health or other unmet needs for themselves or a family member, then people connectors can provide additional information or, with consent, give assistance to liaise with or support connection to services.
I actually door knocked on an elderly couple's door through our sessions, and that in Mareeba. We started having a chat in that. We found out that their mental health wasn't so great, and we thought, let's unpack this a bit. And it turns out they just needed a bit of a hand getting some support services around with their aged care. Billy and Sam, it's not their real names. Billy was living up in the tropics, and that was quite hot, and he just wanted to get out and mow his lawn, but unable to, and that he'd had a triple bypass. And that his wife, Sam, she wanted to get in and get the housework done, but she needed a hip replacement, and that, so just little things like that they needed a hand with. So we were able to assist they were also hard of hearing, and that's, which was a bit of a barrier because the people on the end of the line for the phone calls they were making had rather thick accents. And that, so what we did, we organised a time with them. We were able to meet up, give the aged care people a call, and that have a chat. We were able to interpret some of the language that they did not understand. We got them to email the information packages to us because they weren't real tech savvy too. And then by the time we'd finished the round, we'd link them into services. They had their aged care package all set, so good to go. So that was just one of the many ways we were able to help. And that, what about you, David?
Householders, Rob and Sue, not their real names, told us that they did not need anything. So we asked Rob and Sue if there was anyone in the family that would benefit from social and emotional well-being supports. Rob and Sue told us that their son, Kaleveld, not his real name, is struggling with his mental health concerns. And Rob and Sue asked if we could make an appointment to see their son, and they stated that their son is desperately in need of supports. So the next day, we visited Kaleveld with Rob and Sue, and Kaleveld is a 33-year-old male struggling with paranoid schizophrenia, socially isolated, withdrawn, and that has impacted Kaleveld. Kaleveld could not go out and could not manage his physical health, could not manage his medication, and Kaleveld smokes very heavily. He's on DSP, so that means it's really eating his money for DSP. And so Kaleveld desperately needed help, and Kalevd's parents did not know what to do. So we supported Kaleveld to make initial contact with NDIS, and we assisted him through verbal access process through the phone, and we also linked Kaleveld with the local men's shed, where he could be able to get extra supports, and the emergency food relief center. And we have also linked Kaleved's parents because they were so exhausted, according to what they told us, and we linked them to Carer Gateway for emotional and practical supports.
So you can imagine with a project like this, there were many overall challenges in undertaking this project, both for people connectors and also for householders. The COVID-19 virus being ever present, impacting on everyone with lockdowns, disrupting door-knocking activities. The floods in northern New South Wales and Queensland, and actually other parts of New South Wales as well, resulting in the loss of one project site in Kyogle, New South Wales. There were damaged roads and delays in project rollout. Some sites had previously experienced bushfires and now had floods. There were secured high-rise towers and limited access to residents. The weather being too hot or too cold, or the combination of rain and wind with few householders wanting to stand at their front doors and talk. There were high cyclone fences and padlocked gates in some suburbs because of increased crime. And for one area, the presence of a cult, with people connectors initially reluctant to engage. Of course, there were very specific challenges for people connectors. Hearing householders' personal stories had the potential to trigger one's own trauma background or PTSD. The Jumping Castle tragedy involving school children in Devonport, Tasmania, presented very specific challenges for the people connectors in that region. People connectors were told about suicides by students and the negative effects of lockdown on university students. Translating and adapting the survey questions often proved difficult, especially for some First Nations people. For some householders, English was their second, third, or even fourth language. Whilst many older people who spoke Chinese reported that mental illness was a younger person's problem and not theirs, despite their reporting of increased isolation and loneliness. Whilst other householders were experiencing distress or substance use, and some people connectors were new to the mental health sector and therefore required additional education and support. Other challenges for people connectors were householders coming to the front door in their underpants. Then there were the snakes and the wet weather, the tropical wet weather, and dogs not being contained, but for one team suspecting that a householder had died in a home.
So what was the biggest challenge for you, Siale, in your community?
I think initially, like, the biggest challenge, we were worried about being able to get to every door in our area. We just wanted everyone to have access to this amazing information that we were sharing, and so everyone, could start off on the same foot. We knew how important it was to get the information out, because we knew how important the information that we were going to get back from the surveys and just having our conversations was for our community, so we could feed back in to look at improving services that we'd had. What about you, David? What did you find?
The biggest challenge for us was the lack of trust that many householders have in the system, with the system, and many times householders would say, what is new that you're bringing to us? We have had this all the time, most of the time, and the system is broken, and we just keep on hearing the system is broken, and so it just really, they feel so disempowered and helpless and cannot see anything that is going to really make any difference. But then through real conversation with householders, we establish contact and we reassure them that there is help out there. And so the other challenge is lack of emergency accommodation and also long waiting list to see a psychologist or a social worker or counselor, sorry.
So the benefits from the project for householders and for communities are numerous. The information resources, the magnet and the brochure, allowed people to follow up later in their own time and supported help-seeking behaviours. People Connectors at one site called a women's refuge for a woman and her 2 children as she was fearful of being further harmed. Assistance was provided with telephone calls and to access culturally appropriate physical health, disability, mental health and lifestyle programs. Some local communities have now taken up the identified issues that the project exposed and are working together to look at strategies and to seek funds.
What was the best thing for you in the project, Siale?
I think the best thing was probably, it was very personal, and that we were able to deliver all that amazing information. And really, who gets a job like this, we can go and knock on people's doors, get their stories, build that rapport and just that trust and just be able to help them. I just, honestly don't think that I'm going to find a job ever to top it. What about you, David?
Well, the best thing for me for the project is the ability to be able to really engage with householders, hear their stories time and time again. Sometimes they will just say, "Thank you so much for coming." That's all that they would say. Sitting with them and having real conversation with them maybe for 10, 20, 30 minutes and just really hearing their stories. To me, that has just been the best thing in the project. Thank you.
Yeah, would like to thank everyone, like you guys, Bill, everyone. Sorry, I'm cutting you off. But yeah, it was an amazing project. So if anyone wants to jump on board, send it to these guys. Awesome.
Our presentation today is but a brief glimpse into the ACDC project from the People Connectors perspective. There is a People Connector capacity building report and that has further information. It's on the ACDC project website. So People Connectors, householders and local communities are all quite curious about the survey and its results. And how fortunate are we to have the research and data expert with us today. Please welcome to the podium Lisette Kaleveld from the Centre for Social Impact, University of Western Australia. Thank you for your present time. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisette Kaleveld from the Centre for Social Impact and I'm here today with my colleagues who are somewhere, Professor Paul Flatow and Yasmin Hooper. So we've been working behind the scenes. You know, the beauty of this project is all the data it's generated and we have not even scratched the surface. So you may have seen this report. This is one attempt to scratch the surface. But today we've also released 2 additional reports, a research report and an evaluation report. So please come and see us if you're interested. So our role in the project was the evaluation and research partner. So they're slightly different purposes. With the evaluation, we were just really interested in the model. We were really curious, like, these guys were going door knocking and having a conversation about mental health. So we were like, how's that going to work? So we, gathered a lot of data to work out if that was effective. Our other job was to look at the survey results and, this amazing opportunity to collect that much data across the country. We were really focused on designing a survey that could really deliver. So today I will touch on both. Finding number 1 is an evaluation finding, and this is my favourite finding. Basically, these guys made door knocking cool again. This is a quote from a staff member, but we were wondering how it would work. And what we found is that people actually were really responsive. So if you can imagine that, for starters, people answered their door, and secondly, nearly half of the people who answered the door wanted to engage. Secondly, the conversations themselves had an impact. We divided this into 3 kinds of ways. One is that people just appreciated the fridge magnets and the brochures. 82% of people read the information and kept the fridge magnet on their fridge. A few people said they moved house and the fridge magnet has stayed on the fridge, or they bought a new fridge and that they've put the fridge magnet on the new fridge. So these were things that people they didn't throw them in the bin. They meant something. Secondly, the conversations themselves were impactful. 63% of people went on to talk to a friend or a family member about their own mental health, and 61% talked about, about 60% of people either talked about their own mental health or the mental health of someone they were concerned about. So that's quite amazing that this would prompt that. And we were very clear that when we measured this, that this was as a result of the visit. So what might have been happening is that the people connectors were such good role modelers of a really informal, low-stakes conversation about mental health, and perhaps that helped kind of normalise it or reduce fear around it. The third finding was that people actually did go on to look for further help for their mental health. So about a third of people, as a result of the visit, contacted a professional or a service or a community agency to get more support for their mental health. And then another 24% said they haven't done this, but they are planning to do it. So that's about half. Again, there's also people who reached out for help for a loved one. So this conversation and the resources gave them the courage to, find help for the people they were concerned about. And a further 23% hadn't done that, but they planned to do it. So we spoke directly to householders, and by the time they had spoken to us, it would have been a few months on, but they were still impacted by the experience. So for one householder, they said, I just felt better about myself. It was a really positive experience, and just out of the blue. It is definitely an ongoing thing, because she was describing how she still feels good just from that one conversation. And then the other householder in this quote is just touching on how it's kind of a rare opportunity that someone comes to your door and it's a safe space. They're going to leave, so they're a stranger. So basically, you're free to just explore any of your support needs or your experiences, and also maybe develop an action plan. So we found that door knocking and talking about mental health was appropriate for people who were hardly reached and communities that were facing disadvantage. So we particularly looked at evidence for this because we could see the health equity implications in the design. People appreciated it, and some of the people connectors that went to a variety of communities, they observed that when they were in more disadvantaged communities, people were really responsive to this. Whether they were feeling isolated or overwhelmed or burdened, it was just a lovely chance for connection. And they felt the trust and the safety. And, that's meaningful. We think what worked is that the people connectors were not necessarily representing an organisation. It was not a service-centric conversation. It wasn't a service setting, and they could explore any options at all, like going to a craft group, doing more exercise, contacting a mental health service, whatever it was completely agenda-free. And again, people sensed it. And people connectors were really practical as well. So they applied a problem-solving approach, which for communities that were disadvantaged and people who were hardly reached, that was really important to just break down steps, not just have an abstract conversation, but actually give resources and solutions. So I've got 3 more findings based on the survey data. So what did we find out from the 4,000 plus responses that we collected? Firstly, there are significant indicators of poor mental health and wellbeing. We found about over half of the people in the survey had some kind of distress, moderate, high, or very high distress. 1 in 10 were very high distress. 2 in 5 reported low wellbeing. So, yeah, we think that this is quite concerning. We also looked at the extent to which people were connected to services. And we also wanted to know about the barriers, like why weren't people connected to services if they needed them? The number one reason across all of the communities was preferring to self-manage, which we acknowledge is a little bit ambiguous. We don't know whether that means people were very resilient and resourceful, or perhaps it was that Australian thing of I can do it all on my own and I don't need help. But given that the other top 3 were being afraid, embarrassed, ashamed, or not knowing where to get help, we think perhaps stigma, like all 3, may point to stigma. And then you've got the more, the structural barriers that we talk about all the time. But it is just interesting that the top 3 barriers were very much based on personal beliefs and attitudes, which can be easily overcome, especially with a project such as this. There was, however, a lot of variation across communities in which barriers were more active than others. You might not be able to see this, but this is just a snapshot and it's in the report. But there's, for example, being afraid, embarrassed or ashamed to seek help varied a lot. In Macedon Ranges, it was only 3% of people reporting this, but in Burnie, in Tasmania, 57% of people reported this. So you can see the variation. Again, the cost did vary as well, but not as significantly as the stigma. So we looked at sort of rates of service access, and we looked at them across different cohorts and say, yeah, there were slight differences between males and females or across age groups or Aboriginality, for example. There were slight differences, but the main difference actually was where people lived. So you can see that, if you live in Ipswich, about half people was accessing services compared to Clarence Valley, which is less than a quarter. So that's a really interesting finding for us, which we'd love to explore more. And finally, the social determinants of mental health. So this was a huge finding. We tested it against lots of different sort of traditional social determinants, but also we put in a few extras, the COVID-19 pandemic, and concerns about climate change. So obviously during this project period, the pandemic was very a feature top of mind for people. So that's the number 1. Financial stress, physical health, and then concerns about climate change was number 4. So yeah, you can see there's a lot to explore, and when we tested them against the measures of mental health or poor mental health, and you can see, so if you don't know what a correlation is, this is a good visualisation of how it behaves. So you've got the K10 over on the left and the WHO5 on the right, and this is an example for financial stress. So as concerns about financial stress are more active in someone's life, their distress increases and their wellbeing decreases. So it's quite neat. And we've got these published in the research report. Okay, thank you very much. That's all from me.
Thank you so much. We've got, for these, I'm just going to open the questions. If we got a chance for a few questions, Bill, one question. Okay, let me just find where this all went on me, happening now. Sorry about this, sorry. First of all, a round of applause for our speakers just now, and thank you for reporting the outcome of this incredible project. And one of the questions is, here it comes. So thanks, Lisette. And questions? The outreach program. Christine, there's quite a few questions about whether quite a few people want to ask this question, whether the NMHC being a statutory body will help us getting any closer. So maybe you can get us any closer to having governments take responsibility for mental health and wellbeing. So if you could answer that online. But how did you pick? So, Julie, how did you pick the areas to visit for the ACDC project?
So we didn't. The community managed organisation selected areas based on criteria of, disadvantage or other multiculturally diverse, that kind of thing, a large Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population. So that was a diverse range and making sure that we covered each state and territory. I noticed there was another question around safety of people connectors. One of the major criteria was never to go inside. The conversations all stayed at the door. You didn't go inside, you didn't go into backyards. If we were in a block of units and the people were a bit worried about others hearing, we could often go and sit outside or in the local park. We had lots of conversations in local parks. So maintenance of safety for people connectors and for householders was number one priority at all times. And yes, there is a round 3 and it's starting in April this year. We're going to do longer period of time on each site, more than 13, 14 weeks, maybe 5 or 6 months. There'll be a lot more follow-up and engagement with people, try and see if we can get some consent to go back and see if people have been able to connect with services, and if they haven't, is there an opportunity then to support the person to connect with services or look at the reasons why they were not able to. But fewer sites, but for a longer period of time, and just to really enhance that connection with services that people need. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you very much for answering a couple of those questions. And I liked, the idea that you made door knocking cool. Very nice. And now would you please give a very warm welcome to our host and the CEO of Community Mental Health Australia, Bill Guy. Welcome him back.
Thanks, everybody, and I'll be fairly brief because I know that you've just managed to hang into the end there. But first of all, wanted to thank the people, the ACDC guys there, Dave and Siale and Julie, they're up there, and Lisette there. Thank you so much for that. It's been such a privilege working on that project, but I also want to acknowledge the other people in the ACDC team here, James and Henina, and Ian and Raimonda, who's also got a triple role and something else that I do have to acknowledge as well too. Now, I'm going to call upon my colleagues for help here because I just know I'm going to forget somebody rather when I do the thanks. But you do need to do some thank yous here because we've got to show some gratitude at the end here, and there are lots of people to thank. But I also want to take the opportunity for 2 very brief calls to action because we're here right now and we're about to depart, and I think I would like to leave that as something to consider and give some energy to as you leave and move on to your lives after being here. First of all, thank you all for being here. This is a varied group of people with diverse views, but I've found that it's very rewarding to be part of this community and sense of identity and network. There's far more commonality of our purpose and feeling, then there is difference here right now. And it's a great pleasure, and I know in my life, the networking, the opportunities to connect and work with people, and all you guys here actually makes my life feel fulfilled and worthwhile. So thank you, and thank you for being here, and thank you for continuing to that networking as we move forward. I would also like to thank the conference organisers, Think Business Events, TBE, Kim and her team. We couldn't have done it without them. They've done a brilliant job behind the scenes there, and thanks guys. I certainly give them the stamp of approval and recommendation. The Conference Reference Committee I mentioned before, and so there's some great people there, and I will quickly, we have Eileen McDonald, Hayley Abel, Deborah Hamilton, Kerry Hawkins, Sarah Sutton, Jeff Harris and Jeff Radford, Jennifer Day, Helen Day, I know there's somebody really important I've forgotten, Judith Drake, that's it. Oh, that would have been terrible. I would have got a really big trouble for that one there. But I particularly also do want to thank Ramonda Ditchwell as well too. Ramonda's been fabulous, and I'd like to give her a round of applause too as well too. And my gift to her is not to bring her up on the stage and give her a bouquet of flowers and one of those corny things they do at the end of the conference there, because that would have been worse for her, but maybe there could be something or other arriving at the place sometime later mysteriously. And with her too, the other members of CMHA that I mentioned before, the ACDC team, have been very helpful in putting the conference together, which we couldn't have done, of course, if it wasn't for the fabulous Jean Kitson. Jean, thank you. You're such a delight and such a pleasure. The qualities that you bring, and the lightness and the sincerity and the gift of humour that you have, which in this difficult life is such a deep gift, and you have it in spades, and it was so brilliant to have it here at the conference. Thank you, Jean. Thank you very much. Of course, the speakers as well too, and I can't thank them all there, but I do want to, because she came the furthest distance, of course, thank Michelle Funk so much for coming all the way from Geneva here to speak with us, and it's been a real pleasure to have the opportunity to listen to you and have you here as well too. So thank you, Michelle. Of course, that doesn't mean that everybody else is not. All consider yourselves all thanks, and I won't go through the exercise of naming 45 people up here, because that'll be torture. The sponsors, I won't go through them. They were all here. They're all gone there. They were actually up on there, but they're gone there right now. But what we didn't mention last time, because their brochures weren't up here, was the sponsors for the bursaries too, and I know a number of you have taken advantage of that, so thank you very much, Wellways, thank you Mission Australia, and thank you very much the National Carer and Consumer Forum as well too, for enabling people to come, which I think in future we just got to figure out even smarter ways of doing that more and more, so we can actually have really, we can talk the talk and walk the walk of having lived experience centrally here, and the primary drivers of the conferences and the processes. So that's a goal, an aspirational goal for us to seek to move towards. We will make the presentations available, as we said. The plenary sessions have been filmed, and so the bad news is you get to see me again, but you'll get the good news is you will get to see others there, and the PowerPoint presentations too. This may take a little bit of time, so please bear with us too as we go through the logistics. Now, have I forgotten anybody in the thinking? Looking at my team here to see if you're going to have anything that I haven't thought of. No, I'm not getting any. So I hope I've remembered everybody. Once I made a disaster, and it's been a trauma for the rest of my life, so I'm kind of paranoid around this question. Let this go. So 2 calls to action, and of the many things that we could actually do, I've chosen 2 here. One, I want to go back to the opening there, and I just want to re-echo, because they're still going through my brain, the call that Noel Pearson gave to many of us in Canberra to the sector, the community sector and the NGO sector. He said, Don't leave this up to Indigenous people themselves. We can't do this ourselves. We need you to walk with us to move forward. And he was at the time talking about the implementation of the Uluru Statement from the Heart and the voice, the referendum, the voice. I acknowledge the different points of view out there, and I encourage people to continue to investigate and inform themselves. My view is, knowing the conservatism in Australia and all the forces and all the balance, we've got to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and we need to work with what we can do, and I think we can and we will get the voice over. And that's what we should aim for, and then move one step at a time. So I call upon you all to continue to have those conversations with people outside, people that don't think about this. It's only those conversations you have with Auntie Sylvia. It's a particular reference of mine. And the conversation always starts, I'm not prejudiced, but you need to have the conversations with Auntie Sylvia and others, because that's how you reach out more broadly, and it's up to us to do that. The other call and the other voice here, when Bill Shorten was down the front, I threw one question to him very briefly. He's pretty quick. And I said, how can we get over this dilemma between the state government pointing the finger at the Commonwealth and the Commonwealth pointing at the states for funding psychosocial support services outside the NDIS? And he said, he pointed up at you guys up here, he said, it's the voice of these guys that'll make the difference. You've got to have the voice, and it's got to be the voice of lived experience, and we've got to get it out, and we've got to make it loud and proud as well too. The irony is that so many people, as we found in the ACDC project out there, who do need these sorts of supports are suffering in silence. Humans are very good at suffering in silence, toughing it out, not saying anything, not showing your vulnerability there. So to help them find a voice and to be an agent and a channel for their voice, that's your challenge, and that's my call to you to get out there to do it, because there are many demands upon politicians and decision makers, and we've got to be there. And it's a bit of a long game too. We've got to wait for the economic cycles, but please keep the energy up, keep your voice up, and keep moving forward and keep fighting. And thank you very much for coming to the conference. Thank you.
I particularly want to thank you all for including me in this wonderful conference. Thank Bill Guy for organising it, and everyone, all the amazing speakers. And I hope you feel supported. I hope you feel heard. I hope you feel understood. I hope you've got more tools to go away with, and to feel strong in the work you do and the situations you are in, because you deserve to feel that confidence and feel that support. And I hope you have a safe trip home, everyone. And you're now, after this conference with so many speakers and so many workshops, you'll be able to go home and you'll be able to back people into corners at parties, and you'll be able to rave on and on about the NDIS and the NDIA and the NIAA and ROPs and MHVs and IDCs until your victims offer you money or sex to stop. That's certainly what I'll be doing. If anyone wants to go, a good friend of mine is Tim Ferguson, who you might know from the Doug Anthony All-Stars, some of you, and he's got multiple MS, and he's on the NDIS. He's one of his earliest support workers, Kerry Driscoll. Are you still in the room, Kerry? She might have left. She worked with him. But if you want to go and hear Tim do an open mic, he's on at the Harold Park on the 14th of March, and he's going to be trying his material out for a new show about living with a disability and what all that means. And he is hilarious and warm and beautiful and gives us all a way to connect with each other. So that's on the 14th of March at the Harold Park. But if you don't live in Sydney, forget I said it. And I hope you have a good trip back to your individual, and a safe trip back to your individual homes. And thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, bye. I hope that didn't sound like too much of an ad, but anyway, it's for Tim.